Hello, everyone. Let me start by welcoming to my workshop, Multiplatform Adventure. And I want also to start by thank you everyone for being here. On the other side of the screen, it means a lot, so thank you. I also want to thank the organization, to droidCon, to putting out this amazing event. Today's conference, it's just something that I was missing for a long time, so let me just give you all a round of applause. And thank you. It's not awkward at all clapping in an empty room, so let's start. Hello all, my name is Carlos Mota. You can find me on Twitter at Mota. I usually tweet things about Kotlin, about Android, and that occasional picture from my trips, nowadays from my living room. I'm the Android dev lead at With Software. I'm the founder of GDG Coimbra and co-founder of Kotlin Nights. I've been writing at Rio Underleague and a Portuguese tech blog called Opinions Online. I have the long dream of becoming one day a podcaster. So if anyone wants to join a podcast, please tell me. And I love travel, photography, and running. I'm from Portugal, so olá a todos. I've developed a couple of materials for this presentation. I've already tweeted them, but you can find them on my speaker deck, Multiplatform Adventure. I've also created a code lab for this that is on Mota GitHub /KMP Code Labs, and the source code of this entire workshop, it's also on my GitHub. For here, the ADs require our Android Studio and Xcode. And if you don't have Xcode installed, there's no problem. I'm going to show you how you can compile just for Android. So before we start, I just want to show you how you can have your setup ready. Once again, this information is on the code labs. First, you need to install the KMM plugin. On Android Studio, you just need to go to Plugins, Marketplace, and install it, and then restart your IDE. If you updated your Android Studio after you've installed the plugin, please restart it again. I've seen some problems where the KMM plugin was not working perfectly, let's say. So if that's the case, please just hit disable, restart the IDE, and enable it again. And as everything in informatics, just restart and it will work again. So just go ahead to my GitHub. You can just clone the project, and inside this repository, you will see several steps of this code lab. So the first one that we're going to start here is the starter project. So please open the starter project with Android Studio. And then you're going to wait a bit for all the Gradle tasks to finish. So this is always a good moment where I can just show you this comic from XKCD, where we spent too much time compiling. And well, in my case, I usually go to Twitter, but of course, you can always have fun while this process is happening. Since this will take a couple of minutes, I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to Kotlin Multiplatform, and hopefully after I finish, everything is going to be ready and you could start coding. If you don't have Xcode installed, you'll see a similar error to this one, saying Xcode build it's not defined. Well, you can overcome this quite easily. I've added on build.gradle.kts inside the shared model comment saying if you don't have Xcode installed, comment this code block. This comment exists throughout that file, and you can find it when I'm declaring on phone, CocoaPod, iOS main, etc. Just comment that entire code block. If you have Xcode installed, well, it will hopefully build successfully. After this, go to the iOS app that's inside the starter project and just enter pod install in order to install the pods, because since we're using iOS project, we need to download Firebase Firestore, the shared model, everything for the project to work. After this is done, let's get back to Android Studio and you can just compile and run the app. And now we wait. It's worth to mention that well, there is a Firebase Firestore library that's downloaded as pod, and the process is not that fast. But it's also important to mention that JetBrains released the product roadmap this week. And until March, they're planning to do a lot of development in terms of performance compiling for native. So nowadays we can see that it will take a bit more time, but hopefully next March, this will be as fast as almost having your own, as you're building on Xcode. So a bit of theory first, and hopefully you're running all your Gradle tasks. This is something that is happening for a long time now. It's something like this. We have a beautiful castle when we develop for native apps, although we have a long and rough path. And then when you try to use a framework, we have a direct path, but on the long term, we can't build such nice things. And a couple of frameworks have been developing since then. And these frameworks started with PhoneGap in 2006, a bit before the Apple Store and the Google Play Store was launched. And since then, we've seen a lot of frameworks being developed. We have Ionic, Emotion, NativeScript, React Native. I'm going to say Kotlin Multiplatform between codes. We'll see in a moment why. And also Flutter. Of course, cross-platform frameworks have a lot of good advantages. Usually they require a smaller team. You don't need a team for iOS and another team for Android. Typically, you can have people that were web developers, since the language is usually quite similar. And since you have a smaller team, well, it's going to be half of the cost. And this can be translated in less working hours to build, to test, because you're going to test the same application developed just for two different platforms, and hopefully to fix issues. And I'm going to talk now a bit the disadvantages, and this depends a lot on the project at hand. For me, one of the worst problems of this is that you change to the framework implementation of the UI. This means that when you're going to build an application using one of these frameworks, you're going to have that same look and feel when you compile this. A while ago, I would say 8 years ago, I was using Xamarin in a side project, and I've developed an application with it. I'm not sure which iOS was, but there was a huge redesign on iOS, and all the native components now are totally different. And I needed to wait for 4 months or 3 months until Xamarin released the widgets to be the same look as that specific iOS. And for that amount of time, people were still seeing the old UI on my application. And let's think that when we're talking about iOS, usually on the next 2 days, 80, and I'm saying 80 people, 80% of people, 80, updated to the newest OS version. So for the past 4 months, a lot of people uninstalled my application because it didn't have the same feel. And of course, on a store that has millions of applications, there are applications that are quite similar to my own. This is always arguable, but performance does the same. Sometimes you need to write native code. Sometimes you need to develop specific features because there was no support from the framework. Dart, it's not a widely used language for now when you talk about Flutter. And remember that you're committing to a single framework and to a single language. So if you're doing a project for the next 10 years, remember for the next 10 years, you're going to use the same framework. And this means that if for some reason someone decided to stop developing the framework, what will happen next? You're going to rewrite your application? Are you going to develop the framework? Well, these are things that you need to think about before choosing a cross-platform solution. But what about Kotlin Multiplatform? Well, I said that in codes that wasn't a cross-platform solution because the goal of multi-platform is a bit different than the other solutions. The goal of Kotlin Multiplatform is to share the application logic, and with this, you can decide what you want to share. It's not intended to share the application UI, although I noticed that there are a couple of projects on GitHub that make some attempts to share the UI. For instance, they have the multi-platform made on, they have the business logic made on multi-platform, and they have the UI made on Flutter. This is possible, a bit, let's say, hacky for now, but it's possible. So I was discussing the disadvantage from these cross-platform solutions. Well, if we talk about Kotlin, well, you can decide what you want to share. So the UI is always developed natively, so there's no problem here. and updating your application to use a new SDK. You just need to install a new SDK and perhaps compile the application. Performance is always arguable, but you're leaving this to the UI, to native, so it won't be a big deal. You will see a bit of compile time increase, but only that. So you have direct access for everything. Since when you have on shared model, it might be a bit effort for you to do more code to access to some specific parts, but you have complete access to everything. Kotlin is one of the most trending languages nowadays with an amazing community support. So you have the advantage of using one of the best languages for me at the moment. So we're going to develop for multi-platform using Kotlin. So it's Kotlin first. It has a really low risk because you decide what you want to share across platforms. When I first started with multi-platform, I started 2 years ago, almost. And I started by writing unit tests for both platforms. I then moved to write the network layer, the parsers, and I ended up having all my business logic developed on multi-platform. It's interoperable, it's consistent across platforms because we're sharing this business logic, which means that if you put a bug on your code, it's going to be on all platforms. But if we see the cap as half full, we also, when you fix this bug, it's going to be fixed on all platforms. And there is a strong investment from JetBrains and an amazing community support. There is the Kotlin Slack, and I've asked there a lot of questions, and people are always supported and help you. And people from JetBrains are always very happy to help you and assist you. This is a question that I've seen a couple of times, if there are apps on productions. This slide was presented on the last Kotlin Conf. And JetBrains launched its Space that's entirely on multi-platform, and there are other applications that are starting to move to multi-platform. Cash App shares its business logic, Yandex maps the wrappers for C++ libraries, and different applications share different parts. So I've mentioned that it's Kotlin first, so we have all the advantages of Kotlin. The most important thing here when you're developing Kotlin Multiplatform for mobile, KMM, is that it's really easy to go from Swift to Kotlin. I've developed a project that we're going to do on this workshop, and basically I had my Kotlin code, I had my syntax for Swift, and I had my Xcode open, and I was basically copying paste everything until I found the table views on iOS, and I was just trying to understand how the hell they work. But that's a totally different story. So if we have Kotlin versus Swift, the language is really similar. For instance, the difference here is that we have a mutable variable called var. It's the same thing on Swift, and the difference is the immutable one vol in Swift, it's called let. If we're talking about functions, they are really similar. On Kotlin, we have fun. On Swift, they have func. Well, there is this, another small difference. For instance, string interpolation, we use the $sign. They use it, I think, it's a bit different. The return type is also a bit different, but if you compare them side by side, they're really, really similar. So the biggest question here, what's Kotlin Multiplatform? Well, it's using Kotlin projects to target more than one platform. So let's see a real example. Let's imagine that I want to build an application for Android. I will start by creating the presentation layer, the model, the parser, the network. Then I'm going to do the view. And then I'm going to do the exact same things for all the other platforms. And although we can interact with views differently, and if we're talking about mobile and web, we have different components and different ways to interact, the business logic, the logic itself, it's going to be the same. So what we want to achieve with the multi-platform is just to share all of this logic. I know, right? So the big question here is how can we expect, and I'm going to give an extra emphasis on expect, to communicate with different platforms. So I don't want to have on my code if iOS do this, else if Android do that, else if the web do this. I want to have a common solution, and I don't want to ship code that's from iOS on an Android application. So how can the compiler know that I'm building for Android and that should only use Android code? This is really, really simple. You just need to use expect on your common model. And then on the platform model, you're going to use actual. Let's see a real example for this. Let's imagine that we want a platform-specific value for device name. So when I'm opening the application on Android, I want to see hello Android. When I'm opening this application iOS, I want to see hello iOS, hello iPhone. This is the source code that you're going to use on this workshop. And if you look at this folder, we're going to see a folder called common main that's inside shared. This folder, this directory shared, contains all your shared code. And then you will see on top that I've got an Android app and an iOS app. Those two packages contain the native code. So all my fragments, activities, adapters are all on Android app. All the Swift code is inside iOS app. So if I want to define the device name, inside my shared model, I'm going to open common main and say that I expect someone to define device name. So some platform needs to define this. So if I then go to Android main, I will create the same class, and I typically use platform before as a prefix to explain that, okay, this is something that is platform specific. I'm going to say that device name in Android means that I'm going to use Android OS build, manufacturer, and model. And then I go to the iOS code, and I do the exactly same thing, but in this case, using UI kit UI device. And with this, when the next time I'm going to run the app on Android, it's going to say hello Android. If I'm running on iOS, it's going to say hello iOS. So this is the application that you're going to develop today. So this is the Android versions. You're going to make network request. This is a list of conference. It has a chat application, but with Firebase, basically Firestore. We're going to access to settings, and we're going to do the exact same thing for iOS. The UI is all developed, so you don't need to worry about that. We're just going to focus on building the shared model and making the UI call this shared model. So briefly, we're going to use we've defined the user interface on Android and iOS, cyclic and UI toggle controller, making network requests, parsing these responses, store it locally. We're going to use system preference, so shared preference on Android and yes, user defaults on iOS. And then we're going to have a small section just to show you how can you migrate code to multi-platform. So typically, if you want to do this on Android, you would use Home for Database and Core Data for iOS. And this is the biggest point that we have to convince people when developing for iOS. It's you can just read off Core Data and use SQLite. For network access, typically use Retrofit and LlamaFire. For serialization, guys on adjacent serialization, and so on. The big difference here, it's the UI itself, that on Android you use activities and on the iOS use UI view controller. So we want to share this business logic, so we're going to merge everything and use the Kotlin Multiplatform library. So we're going to use SQLite for database, ktor for network access, serialization for parsing. We're going to build as an MVP. There are already several examples with MVVM. My choice here with MVP was just, I thought it was easier for people to understand. Although I'm thinking about creating a code lab only focused on the MVVM to show you the different parts. So just a big overview of how the project is created. You're going to have a platform-specific code from Firebase for settings, SQL driver, and dispatcher. We're going to use ktor for network, SQLite for database. We're going to call send message and get conference to send a message and to get all conferences. And then the UI is defined in the presenter layer inside the native apps. I've written a code lab for this, so it can be easier to follow. You've got here all the steps. We're going to start by creating a logger, fetching and parsing data, storing data, using multi-platform settings, and then I will show you how to migrate your code to a multi-platform. You're going to see this message when going to multi-platform. So basically, you're going to see that it's still on alpha. This is true. So when you update for the newest version of, let's say I started to use Kotlin 1.4 because I think you should use all the latest version. Some of the libraries that I was already familiar with aren't still on 1.4. For instance, I used Firestore KMP before, and there is no 1.4 support, so I ended up creating on native and then importing it to multi-platform. So hopefully everyone is already having their applications running. So let's start the workshop. So I'm going to open Android Studio first. And let's look at this wheelgrad.kts. So this is inside the shared model, and you already have everything that you need here. So you already downloaded all of your dependencies. As you can see, we're going to use ktor, serialization, coroutines. There was an update on Firestore since yesterday, so nice. Multi-platform settings from Russell and TouchLab, going to use SQL Delight. So this is your configuration. If you don't have Xcode installed, you need to comment all of these blocks that say, if you don't have Xcode installed, comment these blocks. Let's start by creating a logger. So we are on our command main inside shared. And I'm going to create here a new file saying platform logger. Okay, so I've already created it. So let's say that I'm going to create this internally, expect class platform logger. And I'm going to create a debug. And I'm just going to create 3 methods for this, warn and error. And then there are a lot of loggers, I know, but I think this is the easiest way to show you how to use expect and actual. So I decided to be creative here and call it Gutenberg. I think there's still no logger with this name. I'm just going to create here a logger, an object. So I don't need to be continuously creating this. And I'm going to say that I'm going to call okay. Then I'm going to do the exact same thing for warn and error. Now we already have defined it for the command model. And if you look at platform logger, it says, and if you press Alt Enter, you're going to say, okay, you need to create it on the JVM and iOS main, because we are targeting both of these platforms and it's not created. I'm going to press Enter, and hopefully, yes, nice. Everything is now created. So if I'm going to use Android, I'm going to use the log class. So it should be log.d. I'm going to make the import, and for warning and error, I'm going to call the same things. And now we have this logic implemented for Android. Now, if we get to the command main once again, it's still underlined red. And if once again I press Alt Enter, it's going to say that I need to create it to iOS. So I'm going to press Alt Enter. And in case of iOS, I'm going to use, for instance, print. And I'm going to use tag for this and message. And I'm going to use the same thing for the other ones. Okay, so everything is working now. So it's now time to call it from our Android code. So I'm going to open the Android app here. I'm going to open, let's say, the message fragment. And let's look for a log. Okay, and I'm going to use this one, and I'm going to call Gutenberg. Now that I've imported everything, I'm going to call log and replace all. And if I'm not mistaken, here at the end, since I didn't give support to this, is going to say that I need this. Okay. And sometimes it's going to say that it's unable to find this reference. This usually happens a bit on Android Studio with the KMM plugin, but in IntelliJ, typically this won't be as red. But if you now compile the code, let's select here the emulator. And just to show you the logs. So we already have people with an app compiled and speaking, nice. Oops. Something that he didn't like. Let me just try to understand what happened. Unresolved reference Gutenberg. Not seeing why. So live demos, right? Let me just once again understand this. Why are not liking my Gutenberg library? Okay, he added the wrong import. So, okay, in this case, he was right. It should be red. Let me just here confirm that everything is working. So on my simulator, okay, nice. So everything is working. I'm using the new log. Now let's make the same thing for iOS. So I'm putting here the shared model. I'm going to use Gutenberg again. So here on iOS, we call it print. So let me just go to my chat view controller. Now that I have the chat view controller open, let me just search for print. So is load messages. It's here. I'm going to call Gutenberg. I'm going to call the tag. Let's just call it chat view controller and use message. Okay. So it's now fetching the new library that we've created. It's building. You can follow this code lab if you want manually with a bit more detail. If you want, it's right in here. You just need to go to KMP Code Labs on my GitHub. So build succeeded. Now let's see the simulator. It's loading. And if we go to the logs, they should be shown that everything is going to be working. Now let's go to the next example. We're going to fetch all the conferences. The next conference, I took this conference from Android Studio Group, and they are on my GitHub, on a gist, and they're all on a JSON format with name, city, country. Oh, nice. People are here. Let me just Say hello to everyone. Hi. Nice. So we're going to fetch this conference. It's a JSON. Basically, we're going to make a request to my gist. So how can we achieve this? We're just going to command line. I've already created the class itself, so we don't need to worry about connecting the UI with the objects. There is already an object that we're sharing called conference. So basically, we have all the information that's on JSON that we're going to retrieve from gist, and we're going to serializable this, so we don't have to worry about the parser, and the Kotlin serializable will do everything for us. If we go to conference adapter in case of Android, conference list adapter, everything is already connecting to that object. And we are already getting that information. But this information that doesn't exist yet because we still didn't make any requests. So if we go here to the conference tab, you'll see nothing. Okay, so let's start by creating the conference API, how we can connect. I'm just going to change here to package files. So Android main, I'm on command main, shared, and now I'm on the data layer, and I'm going to create here a conference API, conference API.kt. Now that's here. I'm just going to grab here the URL and the endpoint. Okay, they're here, and I'm going to create the class conference API. So I'm going to need a HTTP client engine. With the newest release of ktor, you don't need to define it. It's automatically defined for you. And you're going to use coroutines to make this request. You might notice here something strange because I'm saying that this information in JSON, but I'm sending here a string. This happens because when you're going to make a request to GitHub, GitHub returns with the content type as text plain. So if you try to parse something that it's intended as text plain as JSON, well, it will crash. In this case, it won't crash, it just will throw an exception. Now that we've created this conference API, we're going to create a get conference method. Let's get over to domain. Methods, no, class. So we can call it get conferences.kta. And let's create this get conference class. So we want to make a request to the API that we just created. So let's call private file. We're going to receive this API. It's already here. And now let's create our invoke method. So basically, one success, we want to do something. We want to send the list of conferences. Okay. In case it fails, we want to just throw an exception. Oops, this. I'm missing here a letter. So we're not going to see if we're connected or not. So if we're not connecting, probably you're going to have an exception. What we're going to do is just catch all exception and consider that if you're not unable to connect, it will automatically say that the request failed. So let's start by calling our API, fetch conferences. And now that we have our string object, we're going to convert it to have it the list of conference itself. So we're going to say that conferences equals to JSON.decode from string. Exactly. We know that this is a list of conferences. And we want to send the result. Okay. So now that we have this information, we're going to just call on success with these conferences. And in case it fails, we're just going to call on failure. Okay. Okay. So if we're able to parse everything and we receive this information, we call on success with this information with the list of conference. In case it fails, just call on failure. So we now need a class where the UI can call so it can be informed that new information is available. So let's go over presentation and create our conference list presenter. Conference list presenter.kt. Now let's create our class, and we're going to say that we're going to receive conferences. I get conferences, and we're also going to receive a coroutine context. And to be the default dispatch. Okay, so I need to notify the UI that there is new information available. So since we're following this approach, I need to create an interface for this. So I'm going to go over callback folder here and create, let's say, iConference data. And I'm going to create two methods on conference data fetch that's going to receive a list of conferences. And a method for when things failed on conference data failed, with the exception that we've been sending from one place to the other. This is an interface. Okay, perfect. Let's get back to conference list presenter. So I need to declare a variable that is going to be attached to the UI. So let's just call a var, let's call it view. That's iConference data. And for now, it's going to be null. And then our scope, that's going to be a presenter coroutine scope. Now let's create a method that the UI can call. I'm going to call it attach view, but you could call anything else. You could just call it the fetch conference list, for instance. You just need to send the interface that you've defined before. So our view is going to be our current view. Scope, it's going to be the presenter coroutine scope with the coroutine context, exactly. And then we're going to call the fetch conferences list. So let's create our fetch conference list. Basically, we're going to call the get conference that we've defined before. So scope.launch conferences, and we say there, if we open get conference, that it's going to receive on success and on failure. So if we go back to our fetch conference list, we need to say that on success, it's going to be view.onConference data fetched. On failure, it's going to call view.onConference data failed. and I think it's correct. Okay, oh, okay, I was missing that. So we have already defined this. So we now need to provide a method that UI can call, so we can then call this conference list present. So there is I usually do things like I create a service locator to allow me to easily access this, and I don't need to creating over and over and over again the same object. So let's start by creating our conference API that we said that we would send to get conferences. So conference API is going to be get conferences. Okay. And I'm going to say, I could do it by lazy, it's going to be conferences API. Okay. Now I need to create my get conferences. So get conferences. It's going to be the type get conferences, and I'm going to define the get as get conferences with the conference API that I've created before. And now finally, I'm going to create a get conferences presenter that's going to receive these get conferences. Okay. Exactly, perfect. Now that we've defined everything on the shared model, it's now time to go over our UI. Let's start by Android app. And we're going to do this on the conference fragment. So we're here. We are not making any requests. So let's start by creating a service locator object. Okay, it's automatically imported. And I'm going to say that I want the conference presenter. Now let's go to setup and say that we're going to call the attach view. Attach view. And well, I'm saying that I need to send an interface, so I need to create it. So let's implement that iConference.interface. Just going to press Alt Enter, implement members, and immediately everything is implemented. Now let's use Gutenberg, since you already created it. And I'm going to say that it's going to receive this tag, new conference data fetched. And for there, I'm going to say conference data error. Okay, now that we have the information, we're going to submit this information to the adapter. The adapter is already created, and we can get it from the recycler view. And now we're going to submit this list, conferences, and everything hopefully will work. So I'm going to compile to the emulator. Oi, hello. Someone joins. Oops. Yeah, it's installing the new version. Sorry, I wanted to say hello, but okay. So now let's go over to conferences, and now we have the list of all the conferences. So now let's go over iOS side. Once again, if you're following the tutorial, we are on fetching and parsing data. And let's over to to the iOS part, we are on our conference view controller. And here, let's just pull this down. And let me just go to the top. Let's create the same thing. Let's use the service locator variable, private. In this case, it's not a val, it's let. And the presenter conference, it's going to be service locator. Nice, it's already identifying the service locator in it. And then get conference presenter. We still didn't find it because I haven't compiled it. You will find it in no time. Now let's say that we want to do this on view did appear. I'm going to say that presenter conference, it's going to be attach view, view self, and view this. Yeah, it's okay. I can do this like this. I'm just going to hit compile just to have access to the object itself. Basically, on background, iOS, Xcode should be fetching the new framework that we've created, the shared framework. Worth to mention that the framework itself, the name is defined on build.gradle.kts. So basically, it's defined here. Oh, I'm seeing new messages. And it's fetching that library. Oops, it failed. Let me just check why. Service as no matter get conferences. Oh, it's plural. My bad. Get conference presenter. Now let's call it attach view. And then exactly, I need to send my iConference data. So let's just create an extension here. So this should be an extension for conferences view controller and iConference data. And if I'm not mistaken, if I also press Alt Enter, oops, no, different hotkey here. So Xcode is going to say I need to implement this. I add to want protocol stubs. Okay. Once again, I'm using Gutenberg here. I'm going to call error. iConference data with message error. Oh, oops, this is here. Just add error. On conference data fetch, so I'm going to say that stuff.conferences is going to be to the conference that we received, and that I need to reload the table view with this new information. So this will compile the project, and we can go to the next step of our tutorial, that is to store the data locally. So we want to store the conference locally. For this, we're going to use SQL Delight. It's already saying this. I'm going to create this conference DB. This is going to generate an amazing, SQL Delight will read a SQL instruction, and they'll compile and generate the correct classes that we're going to access via eval. I'm going to say that all the SQL code, it's going to be inside data. So if you go here, SQL Delight data, I'm going to create here a conference model as key. So I'm going to create a file, conference model.ascii. So I'm saying that this will be the table for the conference object. So let me just open my conference data model. So create table. conference model. And then I need to say that ID text not null primary key. And I'm going to use name text not null. Or name, I'm going to call it city, country, date, logo, website, and stage. Okay, so now I need to create my insert or replace conference. Insert or replace into conference model, ID, name, city. Just to close this part to be easy to follow everything. City, country, date, log, website, stats, values, and it's 8. So we're going to do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right? 3, 4, 8. Perfect. So now that we've created our insert method, we also want to get a list of all conferences. Select all conferences. Select all from conference model. Now, if we hit compile, it should generate, if I didn't make any mistake here on the SQL, it should generate a conference DB class. All good. Okay, this was already created by SQLite, so we can have access to everything. Now that we have our SQL, now that we have our database created, we need to once again go over command line and define our DB. So let's go to shared and create a platform database. Platform.database.kt. When close it, and I'm going to say that I expect someone to define this create database method. So fun create database. It's going to be from the type conference DB. Once again, since we are targeting Android and iOS, it's going to say that I need to define on both. I'm going to create on the JVM. This is already here. So perfect. And I'm going to create here a method to create the driver itself and create driver that will return a SQL driver. Perfect. Return Android SQL Delight driver and conference db.schema. And now, if you look at the parameters here, we need to send a context for the application, and the context is Android related only. And we don't want to be sending the context to the shared model. So basically, what I'm going to do is define here a init var saying app context. That's going to be from the type context, and it automatically will import the context that you're already familiar with. So app context. And finally, the app database. Oops, and now we're missing the create database method, return. So we're going to create the conference DB, and we're going to call it with the create driver. Perfect. Now, once again, let's over to our command line. It's going to still say that we need to define the same thing for iOS, create the actual class. And now we are on iOS. So on iOS, fortunately, we don't have app context. So let's do the same things, just to have things similar. Private fun create driver is going to return a SQL driver. On the other side, we have Android SQL. So here we're going to have native SQL driver. Once again, it's going to receive the conference db.schema and the app for the name. Here, it's going to be the same thing. So return conference db with the SQL driver that we just created. Don't forget that here I said that we need to define the app context. The easiest way to do this is just now go over the Android project, the Android app, and we've got an application there, app application, and we're just going to import the app context here. We can easily access them, and since app application is going to be the first class to be executed, we can just do this. And with this, we have our database prepared. But now we want to store data on the database. So let's start by going back to the shared model. Let's go to domain and to our DAO and create a conference DAO. So class conference DAO is going to receive a database conference DB. Okay. I'm going to create a val DB that's going to get the queries. So database.conference model queries. And now let's create the methods for insert our conference. Insert and replace conference. And I need to check all the parameters once again. So I'm just going to open this side by side. So it needs to receive an ID. I'm going to say that the ID, it's going to be the conference.name. And we are also going to use the city or the country. Oh, you can even call it the city. It's the same thing. It's good for now. So the name itself, conference.name. Just going to copy paste this part. So name, city, country, country, date, web logo, website. Oh, I see that someone else has said hello. Hello. And the status. Now that we've inserted everything, we need to also add a method for getting this information. So internal fun get all conferences. This is going to return a list of conference. So val that it's going to be we want to select all conference, and we want the list of conferences. Now let's create our conference object with the list of conference. And for item in data, let's create a conference. So it's item.name, item.city, item.country, item.date, item.logo. Now it's the moment that I think that I added too many parameters. Website and item.status. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What I missed? Name, city, country, date. Name, city, country, date, logo, website, and status. Okay, perfect. And now let's just return the list of conferences. All done. So let's get back to our get conferences. So we're requesting the conferences here. So Basically, we want to store them on the database, so we need to receive the DAO object here. So let's just receive it here, conference DAO. And now I'm going to store them on database for conference in conferences. I just call DAO.insert or replace conference. All done. We can also make a thing here, just when we don't have internet. Let's just get all the conferences. DAO.get all conferences. If conferences is empty, call on failure. Else, call on success with all conferences. So we basically said that we're going to receive the conference DAO here. So we need to go back to the service locator and define it. So let's get here, private val conferences DAO by lazy. And saying that we're going to receive a conference DAO that receives the platform database.create. Platform database.create database. Okay. And now let's just send the conference DAO that we've just created. I would say that this is probably some sort of problem with import, and when I hit compile, it will now disappear. Let's just hit compile. Oh, I see a problem. So we've compiled our application. Let's open it. It's installing it. Let's get back to conferences. We already made a request. Now let's just turn off the network, Wi-Fi, also that just to check if we're online. I'm trying to open my own site. So it says it's offline. So let's just kill our app, open it again, and let's see if everything is going to work as expected. So this is the cache on the Firestore. We don't do nothing here. Now, if we go to conferences, yes, we have all conferences on our database. Success. So the same thing is valid for iOS. We don't need to do anything because everything was done on the conference on the shared model side. Just go close this and open once again. I've here a set of settings. So let's go over use multi-platform settings. Settings on Android, typically we use shared preference. On iOS, use an user defaults. So we're going to use a library that's called the multi-platform settings by Hasselhoff. Once again, it's already imported into the project. It's already here. So we need to start by once again creating our platform settings. So let's create a file. Let's call platform settings. So we expect someone to find this object, platform settings. Let's say that we need a settings repository. That's going to be the type settings repository. Repository, that word. And now we need to create these settings. Repository. So we're seeing a couple of errors here. Probably the easiest part is to go directly to that and create this settings repository so you can get over part of these errors. So we're on data, settings repository, .kt. So class settings repository, we're going to receive settings. Exactly. Now we have two settings on our application. We've got the show only online conference and the username that currently is retrieving our device name. So let's just create that. Settings online only, well, settings show on online. And let's call it the other one, my username settings, my username. And I'm going now to create the methods to access the create app settings. So private file app settings, it's going to be from settings type, exactly. And we're going to create a new function called create app settings that will receive these settings. So let's create that method, create app settings, settings. And now let's create these two settings. So the first one, it's a Boolean. I'm going to say that settings my username, it's going to be false by default. And I'm going to say, oops, sorry, it's the other way around. This is online only, and it's false by default. The string for the username, settings my username, it's going to be the device name by default. Device name is what we see on theory. It's already defined here, and it corresponds to the model and manufacturer version. So let's just create two methods for get username. This is going to be app settings.get string with the settings my username and default value device name. So let's also create a set username method that's going to receive username string, and I'm going to say that app settings.put string settings my username and the username itself. And now let's also create a fun should show only online conferences that's going to get the Boolean app settings.get Boolean, and we're going to get the online only with a default state. You can also update this value with online only online conferences. We're going to receive a state here, and we're going to say that app settings.put Boolean, our settings online only with the current state. So we've got our, we've got our settings repository creator. So we're still missing the declaration of what platform settings actually mean. So let's go over and create the Android one. So create method for GVM, settings repository. So basically we're going to call here one settings repository. We can just do something like by lazy and call create settings repository. And here we're going to use shared preference for this, shared prefs as a preferences manager. Preference manager, thank you. Get default shared preference. Once again, you need to use the app context. We're going to create the settings with Android settings from the library. Shared prefs. And now we're going to return a new settings repository with these settings. So let's go over once again to the platform settings. We're still missing the iOS implementation. It's really similar. Let's do the same thing. We're going to call once again by lazy here, and we're going to call the create settings repository. And here on create settings repository, we're just going to access MES user defaults. So we're going to call Apple settings. Perfect. And now we are going to call, and yes, user defaults, standard user defaults. It didn't add the full import. User defaults. Okay, all done. Now that we've done this, we said that if we have the setting online enabled, we don't want to receive the conferences that are not online. So let's go over get conferences and apply a filter here that's going to say that available conferences. If settings what I'm missing. There we go. Thank you. Should show only online conferences. So let's filter conferences for the online state. Basically, we're going to say that they are not canceled. We're going to consider them online. Otherwise, if the setting is off, let's filter all the conferences. Let's not forget that I've disabled the Wi-Fi. We should do the same thing for the exception here, but since we're on a VM, only one place is enough. So now that we've already created everything, now we're sending the available conferences. Let's get over to the Android app itself, settings fragment, and I have here a setup saying that we need to define the value for online and to update the value on our database. So we're using view binding for this. Set online is checked. It's going to be settings. Repository, thank you. Should show only online conferences. And now let's add a listener to the change of this value. Binding callback online, set on check change listener. Okay. So it's checked. And once again, platform settings repository, let's just say only online conference with the new state is checked. Oops. Okay. Okay, let's do the exact same thing for the username. So it's on it username. Let's say set text. Let me just to be easier to read and to access. So set text is going to be get username exactly. And now I'm going to say that I'm just going to add a focus listener to be really simple to add as focus. So this means when we don't have focus, so the user added something on the edit text and received the cursor, we're going to update the value on settings. So val text, it's going to be binding.et username.text.toString. And now if text is not empty, we're going to add it to our rep.set username, and we're going to add text. And we do a similar code for the iOS. So let's see that everything is working fine. I'm going to once again open the simulator here. So we have our conferences list. Now the moment of truth, let's show only online conferences, get back to conferences, and everything worked. Now that we have this defined, let's also change the name of the device. Here it got the device name, so I'm just going to add my nickname here. Oh, it seems that I forgot to, oh, I know why. So basically I also need to go to the machine is right. Let's say that we need to go to message fragments and we're sending the value as default for exactly we're sending device name. So we need to do the same thing here. So let's go to platform settings and let's get back to message fragment. I'm going to create here the same value. And instead of sending device name, I'm going to send help.get username. And I'm going to make the same logic here from when I'm going to send the data to Firestore. Instead of device name, I'm going to say that it's going to be help.get username. So that is compiling. For some unknown reason, since Firestore is storing this value for cool from someone with an iPhone 11, probably there was some, these are ordered by timestamp, so probably there was some issue here on the timestamp. So let's say that Mota, it's going to be saved, hopefully. And I'm going to say hello all. And exactly, here it is already saved and retrieved. To do the things for iOS, we need to compile iOS and we can just call the exact same thing that the code will be shown. On the code lab, I have also a section for understanding time because there are different ways to use time. Android have a specific class, iOS has their own. So we can just use Kotlin X8 time for this. And then I just want to give a small introduction to migrate code to multi-platform. If you look at the code, here we're using Firebase on Android side and the Firebase Firestore on the Android side, and then we are using the same thing for iOS. So basically, if we go to the Android code, we're seeing that on message fragment we have a load message directly to Firebase, and the same thing for send the message. If we go to Xcode, it's the exact same thing to load messages, although the libraries itself that it uses and their hood are a bit different. This can bring several problems. For instance, the issue that I was mentioning with using different timestamps, it's defined here. And we want to have the same timestamp for everything. We want to retrieve the username the same way. So basically what I did was to define expect class Firebase Firestore. And there are already two couple libraries that do this. Unfortunately, when I did the code lab, they weren't on the Kotlin 1.4. And I thought this was a good idea to show how you could achieve this and migrate code to multi-platform. So basically, I need to expect someone to define what Firebase Firestore is because we have two different types of classes. I need a Firebase instance and then the method to send the message itself. If you see here, I'm just going to retrieve the message because since this is on the shared model, I can do everything on a single point. So if we go over to the Android main, our platform specific code, we're going to use a type alias for this. We're going to use a type alias because once again, we're using different libraries. Here, we're going to use Firebase Firestore. And then we're going to get the instance from there. After this, we're just going to use the Kotlin X8 time, and we're going to retrieve the username, and we're just going to call the methods like we used to do on the multi-platform side, but we're going to on the Android main, but we're going to do it on the platform side. Also, a huge thank you before going to the iOS to the Touch Lab team that created the initial version of Firestore KMP. It's a good library. They use Interop for the iOS part. And it's quite challenging doing everything with Interop. So I just appreciate that they break a lot the road and allow us to just go dive in and understand how things work, and we can just implement it on our side. iOS is a bit more tricky. It uses Fear Firestore, and the way to create an instance is just call Fear Firestore and Firestore once again. But the problem here is when we call collection, we need to implement the other callbacks that are used, the other classes that are used. So collection here, it's inside collection reference. So we need to define what collection reference really means. And when we add a message, we also have the document reference that we also need to define what it is, the query, and then, well, the method itself. So it's a bit more tricky for iOS now. Fortunately, there are at least two libraries that are continuously pushing this forward. And fortunately, on the future, I believe that they will have everything ready and you don't need to implement this on your side. In any case, I think it's a good example for you to see how you can implement and migrate code from your apps to your shared model. I'm just going to leave here all of these links, all of this information. The slides are already online. I've already tweeted them, and I will send a new tweet with everything, the GitHub and the code labs. And please, if you have any question, feel free to ping me directly on Twitter. Or I'll be the rest of the day, of course, here on droidCon watching another talks. And please, let's see how many questions we have. So I want to say thank you because I see that there are people using the app. So thanks IOSP on IA Emulator Google for your kind words. So let me just look here at the Slido. So the first question is, does this mean that we have to have the iOS project in our KMP project, or there is a way to include the KMP one on the individual platform ones? So let me just increase here the window. So basically, if you have platform-related code, you need to have it. If you have platform-related code, you need it to have it inside shared model. That shared model will generate a framework. I have all the projects under the same root folder, but since you just need to import this framework, you could have your iOS project on any other place. You don't need it to have it here. You only need to have the iOS main that contains all the platform code. Yes, that's the HTTPS Mota. Yeah, it's the link code lab. Linked code lab. Yeah, basically that's the code lab. You could go directly to GitHub.io. Yes, thank you. Regarding test implementations in multi-platform, what's the best approach? Are you able to implement some tests in common or only in platform specific? If you're talking about unit tests, you can do them directly on the shared model, and that's where I've went to. When I started Kotlin Multiplatform, I wanted to start writing unit tests. It was the same approach that I used when I moved from Java to Kotlin, and I think it worked really, really well. And I had all of my tests. Well, I started migrating my tests to Kotlin Multiplatform, and I had all on shared model after a couple months, where a couple months were like 8 months or so. After we validated everything, we started creating all of our tests on that shared model. For instrumentation tests, you still need to do it on your Android app or iOS app. So let's get over to the next question. Can you create a repository layer in Kotlin Multiplatform? DB, can you create a repository? Yes, I created a repository layer on Multiplatform. If you see this example, I have the data and domain, and the repository, it's all on Multiplatform side. So I'm sharing everything, all the entire business logic from there. Is the AI available rather than service locator? Yes. You've got two really good libraries. I believe it's Kotlin and Coin. Coin is already supports 1.4, and we have a couple of projects already using it. I think, if I'm not mistaken, John O'Reilly has a really good GitHub project, People in Space, that already has a set all the platforms on the same project. And if I'm not mistaken, it's already using Coin on that. If you go to the code lab, you have a section called resources where you can see everything. So is KMP stable for production? Well, it's an alpha version, so I cannot say 100% that it's stable. I can say that there are already apps on production using it, and I'm not aware of major problems on those applications. Being said, you decide what you want to share. For instance, at this moment, it makes all the sense to use ktor for your network. Content serialization that was launched 1.0 this week, if I'm not mistaken, 2 days ago, just then decided to that I needed to update the entire project to have the latest version. Well, it wasn't the entire project, I just needed to increment the version and everything went well. But I would say that since we're already seeing projects in production and everything is working fine, I think it's the right time to start moving our projects to KMP. So if you have doubts on if you should do it or not, go for it. It's also important to mention that next week, JetBrains is going to have also a conference only focused on multi-platform. So be there attend that they're going to give you a lot of information in first hand. So let's see next question. Any idea why I'm getting a finish with non-zero exit value one error when compiling the project? Probably yes. I added a troubleshooting section on the code lab. And for me, I'm going to say pain, the biggest pain of multi-platform at this moment. And trust me, JetBrains have been doing an amazing work and the community has been doing an amazing work. It's an initial setup of the project. Because we were targeting multi-platforms and these things are a bit still on alpha. So there are some problems that on the beginning might steer you down, but to that problem, probably you're saying you have that error and you have something like saying model Firebase for store, it's not found. This can happen from two things. Either you don't have the KMM plugin installed, or perhaps you have the plugin installed, but you have updated Android Studio. And when this happens, you need to restart Android Studio, disable the plugin, restart Android Studio, and enable the plugin again. Or probably you're using a JDK version that's too recent for it. I think if you use JDK 8, if I'm not mistaken, it should work fine. I think with 11 also, but I'm not 100% certain. So try with that, or if you want to ping me at the end of this session and we can see why you're having that error. So next question. It would be interesting to see how this could work with MVVM. Yes, I have already one project related with MVVM. I can create a code lab for it. My choice with MVP were more, since we also have iOS people attending to this talk. Nice, we have more people talking on the chat. Since you have people from iOS here, I thought it was easier for them to see how it's on MVP. On the resources, I have a couple of projects with MVVM, and I can create a new code lab just showing you how it works on MVVM. How to satisfy other developers? How to satisfy other developers use KMP? So I have a good story here. It was another project that I was testing multi-platform. It was to develop the UI. To develop a camera application, and I would add filters to that camera. And I tried to convince the people from iOS to help me implement the UI of everything. And they were like, oh, I don't want to mix Kotlin with this. And I was like, you have a lot of advantages doing things here first. You don't need to worry about core data, that it's really a pain for them. And also, we're creating consistency across this. So this is similar to what we had in times with C++ libraries, where the code could be shared, but it's even better because you're using Kotlin and you can show them how the syntax is similar to Swift. And if you try to use to convince people that are already programming in Kotlin for this, you can always say that, okay, you can take advantage of code already written on multi-platform, and you start to have Kotlin code on the iOS project. I think we're run out of time for questions. I think you have more 2 or 3 questions, please feel free to ask me on Twitter or here on the chat. I hope you've enjoyed my session and were able to follow the workshop. I see that I am still receiving questions, so there are people using the app. Nice. And thank you for coming. And it was a pleasure to be here with you all.